Be scared. We're not in 6th standard moral lesson classes. So let's try to find out morals that are useful to us as innovators, as entrepreneurs, as startups. So, moral of the story. Okay, I'm blessed with a very bright mind, but just 2 years, so one after the other. Sorry,
yeah, I think you need a sling which can project you at a much higher speed. So you need to have something which gives you that advantage, and you need to have a good focus on what you want to do.
Secret sauce. Okay.
Apart from being focusing on what we do, it is also important to know what your Goliath is.
Okay. Who your Goliath is. Okay.
Innovative tools.
1 second. Yeah.
Sometimes agility is better than the perceived strength or the size.
Okay. What else?
Play with your strengths.
Play with your strengths. Okay.
No assumptions on market share, they need accuracy, details, which will help you more to focus on this.
Okay. That gentleman.
Courage to fight with giant.
Have the courage to fight with giant.
Do something which is never expected out of it.
Okay. Yeah. Even giants have weaknesses. Okay.
Stick to the basics.
Stick to the basics. I mean, sticks, right? Literally, sticks to the basics. Okay. Yeah. Don't be afraid of competition. Okay.
Without your own stick.
Okay.
When you have innovative ideas, you don't really have to worry about giants.
You don't have to worry about giants. Okay.
There's a chink in every armory.
There's chink in every armory. Okay. Sorry?
Folklore could be misleading.
Folklore could be misleading.
Innovation can kill the biggest of the enemies.
Innovation can kill the biggest of the enemies. Okay.
You should know which is the appropriate weapon, which is your appropriate weapon to fight.
Biggest confident of it.
Okay.
Moral of the story is don't believe in.
Some of you are back to now 8th standard, 9th standard moral lessons. We're not able to keep to the standards of what we want out of this session for our context. Yeah.
It's not necessary to play by the games, by the rules of the game. You can always
Brilliant. Okay.
Play on your strength and use common sense.
Sorry?
Play on your strength and change the rules and use common sense.
Okay.
focus only on your core competence.
Sorry?
Focus only on your core competence.
Okay.
Believe in the expertise that you have.
Okay, yeah, so strengths, competencies, yeah. That girl, yeah, that lady. Battle is not about size. So why do we write so much about e-commerce giants raising billions and billions of dollars?
Look at the weakness of the opposition and seize the opportunity.
Sure. Last one.
Density of the stone matters.
We're not in 8th standard physics class. Okay, all right. So thank you so much. Leveraging David's strength to exploit Goliath's weakness, right? So we spoke about Goliath, the chink in the armory, and we also said David has strengths, but this strength is immaterial if it was not rightly matched with the weakness that Goliath possessed. So let's say this giant did not suffer from acromegaly. What do you think would have happened?
No story.
No story. Exactly. Why do you make the assumption? What was David watching when Goliath was led to the battlefield? By whom? So why does the mightiest warrior have to be led to the battleground? I mean, he should be able to just gallop to the point, right? I mean, literally, he's the greatest warrior known to man. So the point is, this apparent weakness that the Goliath, the giant, has matters only in the context of the particular strength the only strength that David had, right? Yes or no? Right? Now, let's say what would have happened if, so the strength that David has is this accurate slingshot, right? That's only strength.
He doesn't know that the other guy has acromegaly or whatever.
That's precisely the point they're trying to prove. They're saying he realized that, because why does a giant have to be brought down to the battle, the point where the battle is fought? So the David here looks at this giant and says, well, there is a weakness, right? There is a weakness, and the weakness is that if this guy can't see, he's short-sighted, nearsighted, right? And he's not very flexible in the sense because he's this 300 whatever pounds of armor, and he only knows hand-to-hand combat.
No, maybe David, like he says that he fights lions and tigers, so he knows that even he's this bit far.
He doesn't fight. I mean, he doesn't fight this way, right?
He kills them. He kills them.
Exactly. But so there's only one strength.
Yeah.
Now that strength is useless if Goliath didn't have the weakness of acromegaly, right? But that's one. What's the other one? Change the rules of the game. What was everybody, including the King Solomon, expecting to happen? Hand-to-hand combat. And Goliath, the giant, what was he expecting? Naturally the same thing. He was saying, okay, now come to me so that I do whatever, right? But what did David do? Change the rules of the game, right? But let's just ask this one question. Let's say David changed the rules of the game at a time when it was a little too early. What do you think Goliath would have done? It's a stone coming and going to hit you. What will you do? Which Sehwag never did very well. Yeah? That one miss happened, then what do you think would have happened? The story will not be there. Right? So it was very important that the David did not awaken the giant too soon. Right? So there was timing. So there was the right time at which David had to watch for and make sure that he is ready to take aim and send that accurate slingshot at Goliath, which will bring him down. And at that point, when it was too late for Goliath, what was he looking at? He was basically looking at a stone, and what was he thinking? Let me have 100 virgins in the afterlife. Right? What else? You're ready to go. Right? So there's nothing the giant could have done. Right? At that point, it was too late. It was too late because the rules of the game had changed, and this guy was. Right? So can we call disruptive David and disrupted Goliath? How do you get Goliath to play by your rules? Do you have the option? What matters here? Do you have the option of not fighting the giant too soon? Right? So is the point here, is the lesson here to fight the giant in a better way or to not fight, but change the rules of the game? And let the giant expose and drown on his own weakness. Right?
You have to fight.
Yeah, you had to fight, but clearly there was the rules of the game that were totally in the hands of David. He was able to time it. But he couldn't have waited too soon. I mean, he couldn't have waited too long, or he couldn't have moved too soon. In either case, there will be no story.
So you have to be at the right place and the right time. That is also.
Exactly. Right? So how does this matter to us? Can we think of David as the startup, the innovator, and we think of Goliath as the market leader? Right? Okay. Yes, we can. Yes, we will. Wonderful. War cries. Yeah, yes, we can. Yes, we will. All right. The question is there any other way that David could have defeated Goliath other than disruption? So we started this section by saying disruption is an imperative for startups or innovators, and we said imperative is what it means. What does it mean? It means it's the only way out. Is there any other way out for the David? Right? So the point is there any other way? If there is no other way for a startup to take on the market leader, the giant, and if disruption is the only way, then what strategies when it comes to technology, when it comes to product, when it comes to market, when it comes to business strategies, can we learn from this story, but learn it in a manner that is useful for us to do our jobs? Yeah. So one of the high points in my life is I got a chance to intern with Professor Clayton Christensen of the Harvard Business School, who created this framework for disruptive innovations. He wrote 2 books, Innovator's Dilemma and Innovator's Solution. And he created this framework called Disruptive Innovation. What it actually does is that it gives you a framework to understand disruption, to be able to look at past examples of disruption and be able to reason, why did these Davids, and we look at a few examples, how did these Davids go about doing this act of disruption? And the benefit of the second part of the framework, which is even more beneficial, is how can we use that to bring about disruption ourselves? So that's how theories work, right? They not only predict and reason what happened in the past, but they can also predict what's going to happen in the future. That's why they're good theories, right? So, in his own experience, Clayton Christensen started with Nucor Steel, and this is disruption in steel industry. We're not talking, electric cars and computers and supercomputers and none of that. This is as low tech as it can get. Nucor is a steel company back in the 70s and 80s in the US. These guys went about disrupting the steel industry, right? And the conventional business process of steel manufacturing is called the integrated steel manufacturing model, right? It's very high fixed cost. You can't do less than 5,000 tons for it to be economically viable, right? And these guys came up with this new technology called the mini mills, right? And then in a matter of 18 years, 75 to about 93, they had a market share of 55%. Right? And look at the metrics, the key business metrics, market share, profit share. At the point at which disruption was done, the point at which the stone was here, right? They had 80% of the profit share of the US steel market. Disruption was over. The only thing Bessemer Steel, US Steel, and all of those giants had to do was file for bankruptcy, including Bethlehem Steel and all of them. There were about 6 or 7 large steel corporations which went down and they got bought over and all kinds of things happened. Clearly the new technology, the rules of the game had changed. It was mini mills. It was no longer integrated steel mills, right? There's a lot for us to learn from this example. Let's look at a few more disruptive Davids and disrupted Goliaths. Can the guys at the back see this? Yeah. So Nucor versus US Big Steel, Walmart versus Sears, and Walmart now is going through disruption. Who's doing that? Right? Honda, Toyota versus the big US automobile industry. I should have added Chrysler. Southwest versus US big airlines. PCs versus mini computers. Salesforce.com. iTunes versus music labels. Netflix versus Blockbuster. Right? So we looked at the example of Nucor Steel. It took 18 years for disruption to be complete. You know how long it took Netflix to complete disruption? 5 years. So in 2003, when Netflix was just about up and coming, Blockbuster had an annual revenue of about $25+ billion, right? What were they thinking when they named themselves Blockbuster? Look at what happened in 2008. They filed for bankruptcy. 5 years, disruption over. Why did it take much less time for Netflix to finish the process of disruption? Power of technology, power of business model. Right? QuickBooks versus US, CPAs, right? Which is chartered accountants, basically. Gmail versus enterprise mail. Other examples? Any Indian examples?
Housing.com over 99acres.com.
We'll ask Rahul Yadav tomorrow when he comes.
Ola versus
I mean, talk examples of the scale.
There was one thing which is stock market robotic.
Nirma versus Surf, can we say that? Yeah? And now Gadi is doing that for Nirma, right? They're sticking it up. Yeah? What else? Amul. Yeah, sure. Trinetra is doing that. Okay. Other examples? Naukri. Absolutely. Yeah, but yeah. Monster, Naukri, both of them. Yeah. What else? Other examples? Sorry?
Yeah, the Bajaj bike versus scooters.
Bajaj bike versus scooters disruption. Maruti. It had the benefit of being a monopoly for 5 years. Disruption. Yeah? Very good. I have that in the next slide. Sorry? Was Kodak a disruptor or disrupted? See, Kodak is a perfect example, right? So Kodak was actually disrupted with the previous generation of photography, and then they got disrupted themselves. You know what is the first company which launched digital cameras? Exactly, right? Typewriters, computers. Yeah, I would agree so. Yeah. What other examples? Anything else? Android, Windows. Yeah, sure. Okay, let's look at some more. Right, but before that, I have a few questions that we got to answer. Right. Why did such technologies remain elusive to the Goliaths with R&D armies?
Because they are more like bureaucratic or.
So let's go back to this this chart here. Right? So this is the progression. So mini mills starts with the lowest quality of steel in that segment, and then they start climbing up. What were they thinking? I mean, this is US Steel doing about $20 plus billion of revenue a year. Even a percentage of that is what? 1% of that is what? $100 million. Sizable money for them to put into R&D, and actually, I mean, Newcott didn't land from Mars, right? There were a bunch of blokes who just got together and said, let's do a new technology. Why did it remain elusive to?
Because they are bound by their own technology. They are thinking
challenging the status quo.
culture is built up in
No, they are thinking if they don't do afterwards, they'll not be there.
Sure. So yeah, the question is why? Why couldn't the Goliaths fast follow and out-invest the Davids? All of these guys, the other examples, right? We talked about Honda, Toyota, and all of these guys. And these guys were going about this process of, climbing up. Why couldn't they fast follow? I mean, they said, okay, now clearly there's a threat, right? The guys are doing something there, right? Now, how do we retaliate? Why? Why couldn't they?
Even the react to it even below the radar. When the opponent claims or realize the David, it's too late.
Sure. Just in the interest of time, I'm just going to flip through, but yeah, all of your answers certainly make sense, right? Lastly, why didn't the Goliaths retail and kill the Davids?
by then they will become the David.
By then the stone was here, right? It's too late. Okay, so more examples. Emerging Davids and passive Goliaths, right? Are they doing anything? Right? I mean, PayPal and global big cards. I'm talking Visa, Master, Amex. Right? What's happening? Are they doing something about it? I mean, they're just waiting for the sad story to get played out. Android versus Windows, crowdsourcing versus professional. Any example here? Any other example of emerging? Sorry? WhatsApp instead of Skype. Okay, I need some more proof for that. Okay. All right. Let's look at a few failed Davids, right? And indifferent Goliaths. Okay, now Pandasic, this company was founded by SAP and Intel. It can't get bigger than that. In 2000, 2001, Intel and SAP put about $2 billion into this company called Pandasic. And they were created to become the next big IT monster, taking on IBM Sun and Oracle.
So how it is a David then? already like big.
Exactly, right? They were born giants. They were born giants because they were just fueled with money, right? And naturally they're set to fail. Because they started thinking, acting, behaving as would a giant. And there's only one way to go. Burn $2 billion and that's it. You can't get funded. Pet.com, classic. In fact, it is a textbook case study, Harvard case study, and when we go through IIMs, we read this. Right? 1998, they started the pet food online retailing business, and they spent about $1.5 billion in setting up spacecraft-sized warehouses in all parts of US. What were they thinking? Right? Iridium versus mobile telcos. You know this? Motorola, 64 geostationary orbits, invested about, I don't know, close to $1 billion, put all of these satellites up there, and they said, you know, why do you need all of these satellites? What's the use case? We talked about use case and all of that. Someone in the middle of Amazonian jungle wants to make a phone call. Now, who wants to do that? What's the use case that drives this horrendous investment, right? AMD versus AMD/ARM versus Intel. It's failed. I mean, if it's not happened in 20 years, I don't see this disruption happening at all. No, they started as Davids, right? And sorry? Yeah, sure. Exactly. Sorry? Yeah, Nokia will be there, right? They were, Nokia was disrupted. Yeah? So let's go back to these key questions just for us to understand the learning more clearly, right? So why did such technologies remain elusive? Why couldn't the Goliaths fast follow and out-invest these Davids? Because they were cash rich, right? Why didn't the Goliaths retaliate and kill the Davids? Okay, so I'm going to use the framework that Clayton Christensen writes so eloquently about in his book and actually explain what happened. There are a few things we need to understand about how this framework works, right? So you take any market, right? Any industry, any market, you would actually find that different segments, right, are on different tiers from the low end to the high end. And at the lowest end, you have what is called the lowest quality application or use of that technology, right? And there is one performance dimension or attribute which is most important. In the example of steel, it was the quality of steel, right? So at the lowest end, you had these angle rebars where you could have the crudest form of steel. So your technology does not have to be greatest for it to meet the quality demands of the applications and segments at the lowest end. Whereas at the highest end, you had sheet steel. And sheet steel has this mirror quality finish. You can literally, it's got a reflective index which is as close to mirror, right? And for that kind of a performance demand, your technology has to get ready, get capable, and it takes time, right? And you do this for let's say the auto industry, right? As an example, what do you think is the most important performance dimension that drives the technology capability of the auto industry? I'm talking passenger cars. And Karthik did that example today. So which is the most demanding use case of automobile performance? Race cars, supercars, right? So let's say you're the CTO of let's say Lamborghini or Porsche or any of these supercars. What drives your ego every single day? Am I breaking the 10-second barrier? What's the 10-second barrier? 0 to 100 in 10 seconds, right? There are only few cars which have done that. You can sort of, you can count them in the fingers, right? Now, you're CTO of Porsche, and you're saying, what drives, and you have 30, 40 years of automobile experience, 5 PhDs, you've done everything that's possibly out there to do. You're working on, can I hit this 10-second barrier with the next car? And your business strategy, business team comes to you and says, hey, can you make the 2,000 euro car? Can you make the engine and the powertrains and the chassis and the other things for a 2,000 euro car? Let's say it came from the top man himself. Is it promotion or a slap on the face for the CTO? I mean, practically, right? What do you think he'll do? Exactly, he's like, I should have left this company yesterday. What a stupid company, right? Yeah, the point is, at the very top, the most demanding applications, the most demanding customers demand performance which drives the capability of the technology forward, right? But interestingly, what happens is that each of those tiers, their demands grow at a much slower rate, but the technology itself, its capability is moving at a much faster rate, right? So if automobile engine performance is ready to meet this highest demand, how far does it exceed the performance that is demanded at the lowest end? The gap is enormous, right?
So, your customers are slightly way behind your thought process in technology, right? As an innovator and a startup. So, how do you set that expectation?
I'll get to that. I'll get to that. Yeah, right? Now, why is this happening? Why is the demands of the lowest quality, lowest tier customers not heard within the organization, right? So let's go back to the steel example, and then as Nucor Steel was steadily winning this segment, and then they moved into the next segment. Let's say this gentleman here was the regional manager for that segment, right? And then he says, well, we've lost the market leadership in angle bars and rebars. That accounts for about 15% of our sales. And that's what he's 100% all about, right? He goes to the high command and cries, what are we doing? We're losing this market segment. We just lost the market leadership position, right? And then it goes all the way up to the head of sales, right? And he says, get me an appointment with the head of sales. I want to go and tell him the story of what's happening. Will he get an appointment? Why?
Because they are still running at 85%.
Exactly, because to them what matters is that segment where the margins are highest, right? And in his segment, the margins are lowest, 4%, 6%, 7%, right? And let's say the other reason, okay, now what do you do? Let's say they take it seriously, right? And how do you retaliate? He'll say, you know what, why don't you send our quality engineers, why don't you send our production engineers, production managers, let's actually look at what's happening, what is Nucor doing differently, right? Now the guys are all the same CTO experience. Let's say he's the CTO, he's the production manager, and the boss says, so why don't you go and look at these segments and actually find out? He says, boss, I did that 10 years ago, right? Now are you giving me a promotion, or is this a slap on my face, right? So the entire organization is tuned towards serving the most demanding customers because that's what is sexy. That's where the margins are. I'll take questions a little later. I'm just running out of time. That's why. Yeah? That's where the buck is. So there is naturally an upmarket progression. And what are you doing? Right? You're leaving the door open. So the giant is moving up, and he's leaving the door open in these lower tiers for the David to quickly come in, and that's what Nucor did. So what did Nucor do? They said, okay, now hang on. Is our technology ready to meet the demands of the highest performance applications? No. But are we ready to meet the demands of the lowest? Absolutely. But not just that. What's the secret sauce? They have a much lower cost of business model. And what does it do? It helps them price their product, meeting the basic minimum requirements of their target customers, and yet become profitable at that price.
Because of the scale?
No, it's not scale. It's the lowest cost of their business model and the power of technology, a combination of both. Whereas for this guy to be able to outcompete Nucor at that lowest tier, he's got to give discounts. But how much lower can you go? There's clearly a floor, right? Even if he goes and matches Nucor's price, he's actually doing a loss right there. Whereas Nucor, even at that price, can pull a profit. Right? So from the lowest tier, you're able to scale up, but you're making profits at every tier, right? So the guy makes profit at the lowest tier. What does he do with the profit in the next tier? Invest in what? In technology, in making it what? Meet the demands of the next tier. And the same thing works. The same profitability kicks in. He's able to actually pull it at a much lower price. Send this guy to the gallows. Right? He's won that market segment. Right? So what's the giant's weakness that's exposed here? I am not worried about my weaknesses. Arrogance. And what's my arrogance? I am this greatest warrior known to man. 300 tons of, 300 pounds of armor. I can fight spear, sword, javelin, name it. Why do I care about this little thing that's just sneaking through the back door? I can swat it like a fly. But when the guy has gone up 2 tiers, the stone is here.
Actually, that's shown in that data that in the last 5 years, they gain around 50%.
What do you think happened in 1987 for Nucor? They raised $1 billion. Right? Now imagine Nucor doing that in 1975. Do you think people would have invested in Nucor? There was no proof. But in 85, they were the darling of the stock markets. Why? Because, yeah, it was clear. The writing was on the wall. Right? Yeah? Right? So the way to look at this is think of markets as an iceberg. Right? And what happens at the tip of the iceberg is market innovation. So this is the tip of the iceberg is the market that's existing. That's what's above the water level, and that's usually very small. Hence the word tip of the iceberg, right? 5%, 10% of the mass of the iceberg is what is exposed. Right? That's where the giants are dancing, prowling, winning, market leaders. Right? Just below and just closer to the water level, you have opportunities to do market expansion. Right? Now, if you are a startup and you want to go into a market and take on the existing market, what are you doing? You're waking up the giant. What will have happened if David woke up the giant too soon? No story. Right? Now, think of market innovation as what will happen when one large kingdom takes on another large kingdom. What happens? A war, bloody war. Right? Bloodshed. What's blood in business? Red color in business. Losses. Right? So for a startup, do you have the resources to fight a war? Right? What is market expansion? Market expansion is like a big kingdom wants to expand its boundaries and acquire a smaller vassal or a feudal lord. Is there war? There's usually a marriage. Right? The prince of this vassal will probably become the 10th or the 15th wife of this king, the big king. Right? Lastly, market creation. Market creation is like Christopher Columbus, the Spanish king or the Portuguese king, calls him, says, here is a ship, set sail, explore, and when you hit land, do 2 things. Come back, but remember the route. Right? Market expansion is not bloody war. Market creation is not bloody war. Market creation is an activity which is under the water, under the radar as you put it, is not waking up the giant, but that's where lies the largest piece of the iceberg. And this is accurately true with any market, however you look at it, and more true with markets in India where you have markets where the existing market is only a percentage compared with what's actually the potential. Right? So how do startups, when you look at such markets, how can you learn from this and see if there is a possibility for you to actually go bottom up. In the 150 years of business, modern business history, and that's what is the basis for Clayton's book and the research and the book, there's not been a single case of a new brand, a new business, a new product, a new technology that has gone top down and has become a market leader. Not one. And now we can explain why. Yes or no? Yeah. Right? Now, what do you think Nucor, US Steel would have done if Nucor went and said, okay, we're going to put $1 billion, few $1 billion into our technology. We're going to work on it, get it ready to meet the demands of sheet steel, take 5 years to do that, raise all kinds of capital, right? Invest in fixed costs, build the machinery, and then actually put the first ton of steel out. Go to the market and say, you know what, we've got sheet steel at this price. What do you think US Steel would do? They'll discount it. Right? They'll say, okay, all of our sheet steel applications, get hold of the top heads and give them a 1 week party in Hawaii. And for the next 10 years, you will be a loyal customer to US Steel. You can't fight the battle by the rules of the giant. At the tip of the iceberg, in the existing market, the game is played by the rules of the giant. And that's the weakness that you have to expose. So I'm just going to summarize it. So why Goliaths get blown away? There is a natural upmarket technology capability progression and it's natural. We know why it's natural, right? And the performance supply is always exceeding the performance demand. And that gap is what creates opportunities for disruption. And the gap is widest at the lowest tier. And that's where startups have an opportunity, because that's the weakness. And the startup has only that strength to neutralize that weakness, and it has nothing else. And the strength is, I have a lower cost business model. I have a product that will exactly meet only that requirements of the lowest tier customer, and I'll build a profitable business. And that's when they get in, they move up, and the story's over. And the other aspect of why these guys are sticking at the very top is any business, the arrogance is always to listen to your best customers. Why? Because that's where the margins are the highest. That's where your ego as a technologist is most satiated, right? So C.K. Prahalad calls it the myopia of the served market, right? The market that I serve, right? It's like running on a treadmill at a certain speed. You just can't get off and get on at your whim and fancy. You've got to keep doing it, right? And giant is as giant does, right? Which is, Goliath knows only one thing: hand-to-hand combat with every known form of weaponry and smash the opponent to smithereens. That's the only thing he knows. And giant is as giant does. What is that? Your organization, the goals, the capabilities, the cost structure, and the incentives, they're all built around how a giant thinks of, and only the biggest markets, the most demanding customers, the most profitable markets can meet those demands. The lowest tier, you can't. The margins are very less, but the volumes are high, so your aggregate profits are much higher. But what usually drives incentives? Margins or aggregate profits? So where would you put your money? Let's say this guy is managing both sheet steel as well as angle bar and iron as a sales manager, right? And he's getting calls from customers saying, hey, why don't you come and look at our new order for 100 tons of sheet steel? And there's another guy who's saying, can you give me 5 tons of angle bar? Now, which call will he take? Right? Small markets versus big growth needs of big corporations. Right? So a giant, if it has to grow from 1 billion to 2 billion, who will serve that? Existing markets, right? Because it's a giant and it does not know how to analyze a market in which there is no data, because there is no market. So you get into what is called analysis paralysis. Yeah? So the right questions to ask is not why it remained elusive, it appeared inferior. Right? These technologies, new cost minimal technology, right? Into its QuickBooks, Gmail. When Gmail was launched, how many features did it have? But was it enough for you to do your 2-bit with it? Right? But when you contrast it to what Microsoft was serving as leader of the enterprise email market leader, it was serving the most demanding customers. Who were they? The top Fortune, corporations or the education institutions or government institutions, government organizations. And what were they demanding? They said, I need those 10,000 features and plus one. But you ask the question, how many of those features do you actually use? How many features of Excel do you actually use?
10% less than that.
So how does it matter to have so many features? Right? So these technologies appear inferior, and that's the weakness. Right? So it's not why couldn't, it's why they did not. Because they said, well, I don't care. I couldn't care less. Right? And the last question, it's not why didn't, they couldn't, because it was too late. The stone was right here. Yeah? So I wanted to use a Mahatma Gandhi's quote, being a few kilometers away from Sabarmati Ashram. And I thought it perfectly summarizes what giants and Davids go through. Right? So first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, but you win. I mean, clearly he was using it in some other context. If the source is actually proven and accurate that it is from Mahatma Gandhi, the man himself, but I just used it in a different context. Yeah? So what's the disruption roadmap? I'll do it really quickly, right? So you're starting with the disruptive technology. How do you move into a disruptive innovation? So a technology is a breakthrough, right? So what was Google? The page ranking algorithm. Right? Now, how many different applications could it have, how many different problems could it have solved? Plenty, a million possibilities. Right? And clearly, consumers don't buy technology. Right? But how did they go through this process of taking page ranking technology? It was clearly it was patented, I think. It was they wrote a bunch of journals. They got their PhD thanks to this. How did they go through this process of technology to innovation, disruptive innovation? Right? The first thing is they built a simple, affordable, convenient, reliable product and service. And what was that for you and I? What service was that? Information search, reliable information search, absolutely free. Is Google actually free for you? Yeah. So you know the adage, right? If the product is free, then you're the product. Yeah? And on top of it, they did this. They built a good is good enough feature set. For whom? For non-customers, ignored customers, overserved customers of the existing market. Clearly customers that were not on the tip of the iceberg, but were much, much lower than the water level. Right? So when Gmail was taking on Microsoft Email, IBM Lotus, and all of those big players, what was the existing market? The large corporations, the large enterprises, government institutions, education institutions. These guys were buyers of enterprise email products, email solutions. But who did they start with? You and I. Right? Had they started with the top corporations, what would have taken? 5 years of product development, maybe $5 billion, and the same story, right? Microsoft is okay. Let's announce a 5-year anniversary Microsoft sale, 50% discount, and that's it. Google is out of the business for eternity. Right? Giants have a way to just swat a fly. Lowest cost business model that delivers profits at the lowest tier customers. So take the AdWords part of Google, because that's where they made money, right? I mean, Google search was free. Did they go after the top Fortune 100 corporations? They went after SMBs. They went after people that were ignored by the large agencies and the media industry at large, right? Because they were not served. They were overserved. Or they were ignored. And they went after them and actually put a product, put a service and said, we will give you advertising at a cost that's pittance. And yet, our business model is profitable. That's the most important thing. It's not about giving out. Then there's a difference between charity and business, right? Lastly, I'll finish this. And this is what I want to talk about when some of you raised about this question, right? They built a new business ecosystem to rapidly move upmarket and to completely displace conventional technology solution and business model in the target market, right? So when they built this big business ecosystem, we spoke about the example. What was the cost of this business model? It was completely outsourced, right? So to summarize, the definition of disruptive innovation, the 6 basic attributes of disruptive innovation, and I'm just going to leave this as food for thought. 6 questions that you all as startups, as innovators should ask to see if there is a way for you to enhance the disruptive potential of your idea, of your startup, of your innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.